Last week, Lakemount Park announced that none of their rides will be open for the 2024 season. This news has sparked fears about the downfall of the park and the world's oldest roller coaster. However, this is not even close to the first time Lakemount Park has been in this type of situation. In this video, you'll be going over the roller coaster ride of a history and be covering the rise, fall, and future of Lakemount Park. It all started back in 1894 when in Altoona, Pennsylvania, Lakemount would open as a trolley park. When the park opened, it would have been mainly a recreational area with picnic tables and pavilions. However, it also had a carousel and a switchback roller coaster called Gravity Road. Very little is known about this attraction, and there are not any known photos of it. However, it probably would have just been your typical switchback coaster of that era. The park wouldn't change too much throughout the next few years until 1901 when Gravity Falls would sadly close. This would quickly be made up for though, as the very next year in 1902, it would be replaced by what is currently the world's oldest operating roller coaster with Leap the Dips. Leap the Dips is a side friction roller coaster, and as I mentioned, is currently the oldest operating roller coaster left in the world. As the name implies, Leap the Dips consists of many small dips, which give some surprisingly intense airtime and unbanked lateral turns in a figure-8 layout. Although it's nothing special in comparison to today's rides, back in 1902, this would have been one of the greatest roller coasters out there. Not too much is known about the next 20 or so years, but in 1927, another roller coaster would open at the park. Located right next to Leap the Dips, Twister would open as the largest roller coaster in the park. This ride was designed by Paul Smeck, who made other popular coasters like Comet at Hershey Park. Based on the few resources I could find about this ride, the coasters seem to have been focused on lateral field turns and small pops of airtime. Twister would operate at the park until tragedy struck. On March 17, 1936, Lakemount Park would be victim to extreme floods in the area. Although most of the rides, including Leap the Dips, only faced minor damage, Twister would sadly never operate again because of this event. Leap the Dips would close for the 1936 season, but would reopen the next year in 1937. Following the 1937 season, the park would remain pretty much the same for the next few decades. However, in the early 80s, the park began to lose interest and slowly started to lose money, resulting in the biggest change yet in the park's history. In 1985, Lakemount Park would become Boyertown, USA. The park had been purchased by the owner of the Malacup, Boyer. Boyer planned on turning the failing Lakemount Park into the next big thing in Pennsylvania. Taking inspiration from Hershey Park, they began a huge renovation project which added a bunch of new attractions into the park, including another wooden coaster, Skyliner. Skyliner first opened in 1960 at Roseland Park in New York. However, Boyertown would purchase the coaster and relocate it to their new theme park. In my opinion, Skyliner is the best roller coaster in the park and one of the most underrated rides I've been on. The ejector airtime on it is insane and is exactly what you would imagine a 6-year-old coaster to feel like. For the first time in the park history, Boyertown would also add an entry fee to the park which angered locals. Another change Boyertown brought was that Leap the Dips would not operate at all. The reasoning for this was that Boyertown would actually perform worse than Lakemount was doing when they sold the park, and they didn't have enough money to operate it. Boyertown would wind up selling the park in 1988, just 3 years after purchasing it. Even with new management coming in, Leap the Dips would not continue operations. Lakemount, however, would add new attractions, opening a Wild Mouse coaster and a Chance Toboggan ride, which helped the park's attendance. Leap the Dips, though, would sit there unused for over a decade, where it slowly began to rot and fall apart. It was looking like the coaster would never open again until 1996, after efforts from the American coaster enthusiast. It was declared a National Historic Landmark by the US government. Because of this, a movement began and donations started pouring in to get the ride renovated and reopened. The renovation would begin on May 16, 1998, and would use the same tactics used in 1902 to restore the ride. The following year in 1999, Leap the Dips would finally reopen to the public after a long 14 years of it standing but not operating. After Leap the Dips opened, the park would actually do fairly well for the following years. All the rides stayed open, and the park was making profit until in 2016 when Lakemount decided they wanted change. Despite the park doing well, they made the bold move to transition from an amusement park into a recreational park. Lakemount would close their toboggan coaster and Wild Mouse coaster, along with most of the flat rides in the park. These would be replaced by basketball courts, mini golf, and other activities. This change also marked the third time in Leap the Dips history where it would go standing but not operating. The ride would not reopen with the park in 2019, and instead opened late into the 2020 season. Now that the park had transitioned and only featured 3 coasters and a few other attractions, the park started to lose money. It turns out replacing most of your rides with basketball courts isn't the best financial move. Anyways, we're in the present times now and things aren't looking any better. I had a chance to visit Lakemount for the first time of June of last year, and it really did not feel like an amusement park. When I left the park, I described it as a glorified rec center. I spent an hour at the park and got 1 ride on Leap the Dips and 2 on Skyliner, and all of them were completely solo without anyone else in the train. Also, by the way, shout out to the Skyliner ride op who ran an empty train so I could get footage of Skyliner. Back on the track though, the park had maybe 20 people in it who were mostly playing basketball, which is free to use. Because of this, I'm really not too surprised that last week Lakemount Park announced that none of their rides will be opening for the 2024 season. The future of Lakemount Park is honestly looking really bad, specifically with Skyliner. Leap the Dips is protected by the government, so we don't really have to worry about that. However, Skyliner is not. I really believe the only reason Skyliner is still standing is because they're forced to operate Leap the Dips. If Lakemount Park doesn't get any outside funding to keep their attractions open, I think it's very realistic that Skyliner goes into a state of disrepair just like Leap the Dips did in the 90s. When it comes to Leap the Dips' future, we know that it will open, but it may not open at Lakemount. If the situation at Lakemount continues to get worse, there's a very realistic chance that it could get relocated to a different park. I saw that a lot of people were saying that it could get shipped to Knoebels. However, if it does get moved, I think it's more likely to go to Del Grosso's amusement park, which is literally 5 minutes down the road. Now, I personally don't think it will get shipped, but if it does, Del Grosso's is definitely the best contender. Leap the Dips would stay in Altoona so the locals wouldn't get angry, it would stay at a classic small amusement park, and it would probably be well maintained. Now, Skyliner also could get relocated a second time, but I really don't think this is going to happen. Although I absolutely love the ride, most people don't. Skyliner is extremely rough and overall sketchy looking. Unless someone is crazy enough to pay millions of dollars on restoring and shipping the ride, I think it'll probably stay at Lakemount Park. Anyways, on to the future of the park as a whole. I definitely see Leap the Dips and some of the other rides reopening in 2024 or 25. However, I think Skyliner will be closed longer. I sadly don't think the ride is in a good enough state to get ridership, and unless donations come in, Lakemount Park probably won't invest in the restoring Skyliner. I doubt they will tear it down, but it will probably sit molding away. Now, I really do hope that all of Lakemount's rides will swiftly reopen in 2025, just like the park claimed. However, with their track history, it's really hard to trust their word. The story of Lakemount Park is definitely one of the most interesting in the industry, and if you want to learn about the downfall of another attraction, then check out one of these.